It's quite a mystery in that it's inexplainable.
It's a story that's going to keep on giving because people believe in it.
Search for Bridey Murphy, you know, was among the first of the paranormal research books that hit the popular shelves and became bestsellers. I read it as a kid, I remember. Reincarnation then had a very short life. In fact, when Jesse Stern was approached by someone from Canada, Jesse Stern is an American, with the story of Joanne McIver and her reincarnation to the 19th century, he almost decided not to do anything with the story because he felt reincarnation was overdone, overused, and possibly not in his bailiwick. And it did have a short life thereafter. So this kind of story of another life dreamed is fairly rare and nowhere as near documented as Stern's book. It's a 300-pager, really closely detailed.
When we first moved up here from Toronto, and we got a cottage up in Meaford on the water up here, and I just started hearing different things about this, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I found the book.
Living in North Sydenham Township, I sort of had an immediate identification with Joanne McIver's 14-year-old under hypnosis recollections of growing up in basically what is North Grey and North St. Vincent Townships in the 1840s.
Her father, Ken McIver, was doing some hypnotizing of her friends in the kitchen, and I believe she was in the living room, and she went under.
This is where it became a little strange. Some of her trips back into time were as famous people in Roman times and so forth, but then she gets stranded at a moment in the hypnotic moments which he records in northern Grey County as a woman who lived on a farm, a pioneer farm, and at one time was abused by one of the farmhands, and who she then has memories of growing up in subsequent interviews of growing up and eventually dying, and just at the turn of the 20th century.
The way that I believe in my life and with what I do, because I'm an intuitive medium, I believe in people that have passed away. I believe that they can contact us. So let's use this, that Susan Gagné has passed, but she wants her story told, and then through this hypnotizing that Ken McIver is doing, Joanne McIver goes under and starts. So Joanne McIver is actually telling Susan Gagné's story.
And when I read the book, I kept thinking, this is really close to home. You know, this is close to where I live, because I would run into page after page descriptions of families, descriptions of family names. The Speedy family, for example, play a role in her memories in the 1850s. At that time, the Speedies were they ran a general store in Annan, Ontario.
There is a headstone in the cemetery, the Annan Cemetery, of Margaret Speedy's. And that goes along with when I first came up here and I started my research. I believe it was a real estate gentleman got me the topographical maps of the area, and I took the book and I did the names, and quite a few of the names went with the tank range and all the places that she had been.
Two small villages, one called Silcote and the other called Balaclava, have a role in the book. And at one point she even remembers that she grew up near the mountain, and the mountain was once the name of the post office in Silcote before it changed its name to Silcote.
And the twin churches in Massey. And I mean, where did she come up with these stories? I mean, the story, the book that I have over here on Meaford wasn't even out then, you know, on the whole area.
After I read the book, I got really curious about the whole story, and it sort of lingered in my mind. And I remember one time when the tank range, as we called it then, was less guarded as it is today. And the fences, in fact, were down just north of Balaclava, and I went on the tank range and did a small motorcycle tour looking for Massey, looking for graves, looking for the places that are the place names that are very much part of Joanne McIver's memory of growing up in this frontier of Grey County. It could be an extravagant hoax. Joanne McIver tells the story in Orillia. Orillia is about a 2.5-hour drive from here. And today, modern, but in distance at the time when Joanne is trying to recall, 19th century, it could have been a century apart, 1,000 kilometers between Orillia and this frontier. So my question's always been is how in the world did Joanne or her father discover the detail about someplace so far away?
You didn't get into your car back then and drive all the way up to the army base up here, or even to Meaford, Collingwood, to do something that is going to be a scam. Like back then, you just didn't do that. It wasn't a day drive. It really wasn't.
It's almost impossible because there wouldn't have been that many documents at that time that would have been available to McIver. Certainly not to Joanne. She's a 14-year-old kid. There weren't that many documents. There was a gazetteer in the county for 1880. If he used that, it'd be a very strange way to deal with it. But that's the mystery to me, is the huge jump from Orillia to North Grey by a 14-year-old girl who was remembering people's names, family names, place names, concession lines, descriptions of old trees and orchards that many people say, well, that was just over here, or that was just over there.
If this was a hoax, why would they, possible hoaxers, pick someone so obscure without the documentation to prove their case? Most hoaxers of this type would at least try to ensure they had all their ducks in a row with at least some of the necessary documents to support their case.
I think there's nothing more mysterious than how this young 14-year-old could possibly, even if her father had done some research with gazetteers, how she could have possibly have remembered the plethora of names and places and events and times and dates and descriptions of life on the frontier of what is today Apple Country, basically, of the daily lives of being a farm woman.
Nobody has disproved it. And how can you now? But nobody has disproved this. Like you can't say, well, she made up the names, or she guessed at the name. No, she didn't. Those names, and they're there, are real names. They are real people.
There's not been a re-examination of the families, the places, and the events that she describes. No one's ever really took a close look at the local newspapers at that time, particularly the Meaford newspapers, to see if some of the events that Susan Joanne remembers were actual events or not. And the book has been left to sort of drift, which is fine, because not many people really remember this book, or the mystery of the girl with the blue eyes. But oddly enough, it keeps reoccurring. I've had people even tell me that they remember where she died. It was in an old house just off the tank range, just down from the apiary that I think that you visited. Is legendarily the place that Susan Garnier would have died, according to Joanne McIver, in I think about 1903. These simple shards, these artifacts, are basically the story of Susan Garnier, as told to us by Joanne McIver. It's a story made up of pieces and shards, and they can't all be put together to really create anything until someone, some historical archaeologist, finally decides to put all those pieces together and come up with a true story of Susan Garnier, as remembered by Joanne McIver.